So for example, if we're talking about Jersey Shore, and you secretly really enjoy it, chances are you've said to one person, well, it doesn't matter because it's just meant to be entertaining. Okay, so that's true enough in everyday speech, but for the purposes of studying popular culture, what's the relationship between that pleasure with something that you know is kind of regressive in its politics? What's the relationship between pleasure, money-making, and meaning-making? And on the other hand, we have aesthetics. We can understand aesthetics as a term that refers to what makes it interesting. In terms of classical philosophy, aesthetics is a discourse about what is beautiful. So, we have this relationship between pleasure and that sort of sensory input that makes it interesting. We have this relationship between money and meaning. We can see how these four terms all interlock together and interact with one another, particularly if we're talking about these mass cultural texts, or if we're talking about grassroots responses to mainstream representations, even if we're thinking about high aesthetic culture or mid-cult and the types of value and teaching that go along with those. Right? And one last thing that I want to focus on is a relationship between two terms that recur over the course of the readings. I did not write this down. So there are two terms that will pop up a lot over the course of this course. On the one hand, transculturation, and on the other hand, hybridity. So if we're talking about transculturation, we can break it down. Trans as referring to moving across, so moving across cultures. Transculturation can refer to cultural sharing, basically. This is posed against hybridity. If we're talking about hybridity, we're also talking about things that have mixed. The difference between transculturation and hybridity is the specific element of power. If we're talking about, for example, hybrid identities, it's because one identity has been imposed and the other has had to make sense of it. So if we're understanding, for example, Asian American as a hybrid identity, we'd be thinking about not an equal exchange between ethnicity and US culture. We'd be understanding it in terms of, for example, the types of racism that give meaning to ethnicity and this relationship between enforced identity and a subordinated identity. Transculturation refers to this even exchange across different borders, different identities, and different ways of life and meaning. All right? So I think I'm going to cut it off there. If you have questions, please be sure to ask. Otherwise, see you on the discussion board.